friend. He's been a part of the show many times, Brandon Marcello. When you hear now, and there's a little bit of this momentum, and why it took so long, I don't know. Maybe in the end, way things run around laws and regulations and whatever else, it may not happen. But this more and more about collective bargaining. Here is Brandon Marcello from and why this is not as easy as we may think.
Very impossible for them to get all together and go, hey, we have one union for 5,000 football athletes and one union for this for men's basketball and women's basketball. You're probably going to have to break it up into tiers. Say you have a union for the SEC, you have a union for the Big Ten, et cetera, something along those lines to help with collective bargaining. But again, you need some organization there. You also have to consider that unlike professional sports, there's such a high turnover rate with so many players, thousands of players every year. They're only there on campus for 4 years, maybe 5 years at most. And so when you look at leadership, players who are going to represent you and speak for you, they're going to be there only a few years, and then it's on to the next. So it's very hard to kind of keep some consistency there. Also, let's face it, these players and athletes, they have a lot going on in their lives. They have football, basketball, whatever, but also schoolwork, other obligations with their NIL, and also they're just younger. Not a lot of them are teenagers are sitting there going, well, I need to have this meeting to discuss these business practices and figure out what we need to be doing with workload and revenue sharing. That's just a very hard thing to be asking of these teenagers, and it's something that is going to be very difficult, to be quite honest, to really get an organic galvanization here of these players to represent themselves and say, we want to be at the table negotiating.
All right, what are your thoughts, Paul?
Well, here's the thing. The first thing that needs to happen for this to be smoother is we need to do the Cody Campbell plan of everybody negotiates the media rights together, because then the union and the leaders are negotiating over the same like everybody across the board in every conference, whether you're in the Mountain West or the SEC, you're negotiating across the board for whatever your slice of that pie is. And look, if you're a Mountain West player compared to an SEC player, yeah, the distribution is different, right? And the value of that is different. Negotiating across the board, if everybody makes more money, then that's good. I think that makes it simpler if you get that done. This is not something, and when I constantly talk about the CBA, I know it's not something that they can just decide, hey, let's do it. But I do know that these things take time, and I think it's almost like twice, like when you pour a little bit of time out of that hourglass, it's like twice as much every time you keep pushing the ball back and pushing the ball back, because what you do is the more you say, well, we're not going to do this now. We'll do this when we figure the lawsuits out. Why don't you do this so the lawsuits stop? So if you start down this road, maybe you can stop all these things and you can meet in a middle point of, okay, let's get here. So they've got to start down the road and they've got to start doing these things, and they're probably eventually going to need some congressional protection. The problem with that is that our Congress sucks. So they need to move through this and get it done, because Congress works a whole lot better in its current format when you can walk up to them and say, here, this is the thing. Do that. Everybody's in agreement. You know, you guys run it through your committees and all those things, have your little grandstanding, but at the end of the day, just pass that. That's the way it works now, sadly enough. So if they can get to that point, the college leaders and whatever unions you have, which is a basketball players union for men and women and a football players union that has different, tiers to it and all that. If you can start down the road and get that done in the next several years, then, in the next decade, we can have a reasonable discussion about these things and we can show that they're working towards them. But we live in the, in the instant society, right? Well, let's have a union tomorrow. Well, I mean, you got to get, approved by the NLRB. You've got all these things to do, but you can't start on that until both sides in earnest are willing to say, this is what we need to do. And that's what has to happen first.
In the chat room, Go Black 45 said no to Cody. Kim, of course, wanted to know why. Let me see. There was one other note here as well. There's one more person that made a comment. Make them employees with 4 to 5 years of eligibility. And there's no question that a lot of the problems that today we have in college athletics with eligibility and more, transfer portal and more, is if the clock starts and you have 5 years, you go to 5 schools.
Yeah.
I don't care. But I don't know if they're ever going to be able to get that passed.
I think that they will. Again, you have to agree to, you have to start down the path of determining what these things are. And look, if, and let me tell you this, I will say, look, if you're saying no to Cody Campbell because he's up there at the White House behind President Trump and you don't like President Trump, I understand. I get that part. But I will tell you, and look, Smokey and I are on the opposite side of that issue completely. And we get along fine. But I had that assumption about Cody Campbell as well, that is kind of what he wanted. I don't think that's fair to paint him like that. We had a very good discussion with him about that. He laid out the plan. This is not, I know that people want to paint him as, I'm a billionaire, my favorite thing is Texas Tech, and I'm just going to do things to help Texas Tech because that's my toy. That is absolutely not what he is. And it was unfair of me or anyone to paint him with that brush mentally or whatever before you listen to him say it. So I wouldn't, don't put everybody in all one box. I don't think that that's fair.
I think a lot of people thought, because they hear about all the millions and all the NIL, which he's not the only one. Believe me, there are others that are doing that for Tech, that he's the big brash Texan who wears a Cowboys hat. Not at all. Drives a big damn dually, wears jeans like Sidney Sweeney, and not quite. But you know what I mean? That he was the big, loud Texan, like in Landman or something like that. And he's part of that. He's not. He is as unassuming a person as you could ever imagine for someone that's worth whatever he wants to say he is.
And here's the other thing. We had him on, and he said, yeah, I've got to go catch a flight. And it was confusing to us because we were like, I mean, doesn't the flight wait for you?
Yeah.
Couldn't you just call him up and be like, hey, it's going to be 2:30 instead of 2:15?
Yeah.
But again, because he's a gentleman, he's like, I told them I'd be there at 2:15, so I need to be there at 2:15.
Yep.
And there are a lot of people in his position that are like, no, you will wait on that tarmac until I get there. I know that maybe we may be paying him romantically, here and saying it's all great, but I do think that when you hear him talk about it, it is not just about helping Texas Tech.
No.
It is about the long-term future of college athletics, and really, it has less to do with football, which is his sport, than it does with the non-revenue and Olympic sports.
Yeah,
it's more about that and using football and basketball as the mechanism to help everybody.
From Kim, when you make them employees, you bring in the FICA, Social Security, health insurance, and maybe even pension obligations as well from Go Black. Don't make them employees. Do like the Doctors Guild does. Be independent contractors. Don't get full legal protections like a union, but you get more wiggle room.
Well, whatever they need to do so that they can collectively bargain is what they need to do. Because otherwise, it's just going to be all it's going to take is one little individual misstep to create a whole thing, right? The O'Bannon lawsuit wasn't just about, it wound up being about a lot of things, but it was, hey, let's put Ed O'Bannon on a video game. And then you decided that seems like a little decision of using a photograph in your marketing, but it turned into a big thing. Let's introduce NIL, and then as these guys' eligibility runs out, they're going to say, well, JUCO and NCAA are two different things. And then you're like, yeah, but before we didn't look at it that way. And you go to the court and the court goes, well, the way it's written, they are two different things. So you put the court doesn't determine things by the way that you want them to be. They determine them by the way that you've built them. And so that's where they kind of run into the wall.
Go Black mentioned the Screen Actors Guild. One of the things that Kim in response said, that they are a union. The Screen Actors Guild is a union. Remember, they struck 7 months ago. But then we got down, as soon as we get into this stuff, it just takes us away from having fun with a lot of what's college football, but it's a part. Craig would have already walked off the set by now.